So, hi Stuart, how are you? Nice to see you.
Thank you very much, sir. Nice to see you again. How are you?
How was life in Australia? It's obviously quite difficult. Now, offline, we were having a quick chat, and as I said, I'm going to start a podcast or a bit of a show. It's called This Is Qatar, and we've done a lot of work in Qatar over the past six years, I think it was. You just said something quite interesting that I'm going to use for part of my property networking event, which I'm running an online networking event next week, Progressive Property Network. If you're interested, then visit the Facebook page and you can click onto the link, and there is a Zoom invitation for Tuesday, the 7th of April. But back to the point at hand, Stuart, you just mentioned that a close friend of yours, who we will not name, but we'll use as an example, is struggling in this pandemic. Just for the purpose of for the show, just recap what you were talking about there.
So I was talking about the fact that even though people are of certain levels, financially, influencers, leaders, affluent, I was actually referring to an affluent friend. And what I have found the most interesting is that even the most affluent have felt a different burden and have probably all felt a little bit smaller in this ever-changing landscape. I don't want to use the word that I was. What's that?
The P word.
I don't want to use the P word, no, because I'm sick of it. But yeah, I mean, all rhetoric aside, yeah, I've been very interested that even the most affluent of individuals, even the most strongest of leaders would be feeling a different pinch. You know, maybe not necessarily falling themselves down to thinking that they're of a different group, but they're definitely, or the individual I was talking about was definitely feeling a different emotion that he's ever had to feel, because he's been able to probably buy his way out of most of the scenarios that I stereotypically haven't as
most of us
easily.
Haven't.
Yeah, or most of us haven't. And yeah, so
you mentioned that this individual, or as per many individuals within the property industry that are not necessarily property investors, they might be accidental landlords. I know a very close individual in my circle, again, I'm not going to name who they are, who has equity. So let's look at the property aspect. So we're kind of answering certain questions for the affluent, which is kind of defeating the purpose of the majority of people's situations. But you never know, there'll be quite a lot of people that have got equity. So the Bank of England have dropped the interest rates to 0.1%, which is obviously making certain investors that know how they can utilize that situation to their benefit. But how do you think that people who are not aware of what could be done with equity within their house, how do you think they could take advantage of that, with the fact that interest rates have dropped, good credit scores are probably are there, decent amount of equity is in the property, they're long-term owners of this property, 10 plus years or whatever the case may be, they're sitting on 250,000 pounds, nearly say Qatar riyals there.
Yeah, I was going to say dollars myself.
£250,000 of equity. Value of the house is probably about 325, 350, which is quite a bit above average. But we're talking about the affluent aspect. These people don't know what to do with that equity. What can they do?
I must admit, it's a valid point, and probably one of my concerns is that people who've never had that, nobody's ever really quantified that as a financial bonus that is available to them. Most people go into if we go down to the echelon of people we're talking about, most people would go into the habit of, their whole life goal is retire owning the property, right?
Yes.
That's
it's
a very
old school mentality, isn't it? It's a Generation X mentality. I want to own my house. Then you ask them the question, but what happens when you have no mortgage and you get to retirement? What are you going to do?
Yeah, what's your plan?
A lot of people can't answer that question. So you then take a step back from that and say, right, we've now got the P word. You've got a situation where stocks are falling, you're not getting any rental returns. However, you're sitting on that capital gains that you have achieved over the last decade. What can you now do? And I don't think a lot of people can answer that question.
No, I don't think they can. And also, again, I think the point that you're actually making is you're identifying the fact that most people don't have the skill set to even acknowledge it. I mean, for example, I'm in a similar scenario in the sense that obviously I have a property back into the UK. So I mean, arguably, do you class that as you know, let's just say landlord situation. I was smart enough that I implemented a business management team to look after that property, so it just covers my mortgage rather than looking to make profit. Again, I'm not diversifying too much from the question, because one of the other elements is that people naturally rent out their property at profit, which is, I think, where a few people are going to get caught out. I could have, let's say my mortgage is a relatively decent house and relatively decent, phenomenal property. Yeah, let's just go with a castle, the castle that I live in. I could have let it out to somebody I don't know maybe that well, maybe I do know them very well, but I make £400 per month on it, right? Scenario rolls forward into the P word, and they just walk out. So then obviously you're stuck. Now, I decided that I never wanted to be caught in a predicament, a different P word I use there, that forces that gap. My management company will put somebody else in if somebody walks out. But what I don't make is any profit in the meantime. So I've taken away burden and pressure there from a simplified somebody who owns a property and is maybe smart enough to see that there's probably more pitfalls for me trying to make a couple £100 a month than people, but very common. So the less savvy would try and make what really isn't a great deal, but will go for that and put themselves into a bigger predicament now. Move that forward to people who actually own the property, which is, again, probably the same percentage of people between renters and buyers, maybe from my local area. Going back to the UK, this is. And if you identify to them that, like you said, say the property was worth 250, they've paid off 100, they got, you know, whatever, you know, they say, for example, they got 100 or 150,000 pounds in, yeah, exactly, whatever that figure is. It's an unbelievable upscale of number. And because of their mindset of either retiring with that and either giving that property to their children, or just retiring in and, you know, pootling along without any real plan. That is the plan. If you pull it back to them when they're 40 years old with £100,000 in equity, I think you're absolutely right. I would say that there's probably less than 1% of people who would have any idea what they should be doing in this extremely I'm not using the word.
So that spins on to two more points, and I'll say them quickly. We'll take them one at a time. Two questions. Why do you think that generation, and it may fall into our generation, where I'm approaching 40. Where are you?
42.
Oh, okay, you're well beyond it. Okay, sorry about that.
So that's the grey beard.
So our people of our age may or may not be influenced by the older generation as to that mentality. Must buy a property, capital repayment mortgage. Even I know people have got a capital repayment mortgage, even if it's an investment property, which is just think is nuts. Pay it off, not sure what to do when it comes to retirement age. Let's live off of our pension, whatever that pension may be, which for you and I is going to be zero. So we have to look at property as so let's live off our pension and let's give everything to the kids. Question number one, why do people have that mentality? Why not live their life, especially if they have property? Because the capital appreciation will never ever go away long term. So if you had that that property, you take out, I don't know, 100,000. I know someone that's got a house that's about 350 grand. It's got no mortgage on it. You take out 100 grand. Guess what? If they do pop their clogs and it does go to probate and goes to the kids and they sell it, there's still 250 grand in there. And they can then, and I would say that generation and my wife hates this word, the millennial generation are actually getting more, certainly tech savvy, because the technology came in with the millennials anyway, but they're looking at investment savvy as well on how they can use that money. So I know what I would do. I know what I would do by refinancing and taking an element. I'm not saying refinance yourself and take all of the equity out. That's just, I think that's a bit barbaric. Take out a certain percentage, even if it was 50% of the value of the home. But people are not able to use a simple mathematics. They're too scared of in the older generation, they're too scared of the here and now. They're scared about, I'm going to take £100,000 and it's going to cost me on they don't want to do interest only. So they can't get that in their mindset of interest only. I'm only paying the interest. What about the capital? The house is the capital. So you're fine. Don't worry about it. Interest only, they can't get beyond that mindset. Number two, the payment that they have to make to the mortgage every month. Okay, they're unsure as to where that's going to come from. And then how they can actually leverage the money, the equity that they drop down. So my last example is you could find an investment that is paying you 10%, which is not actually quite difficult to find, certainly in property. You could look at joint venture partnerships. You could look at property bonds and loan notes. The amount of commercial property assets, physical assets that are being converted into homes globally, not just in the UK, but we'll talk about the UK because we're both British. The commercial property that is basically downtrodden and no longer required, more and more people working from home, whatever the case may be, new office facilities being built, the older graded buildings are being emptied and vacated, converting them on a listed basis or a pre-planning basis into residential properties. You have an asset, you get a 10 to 12% return, and your mortgage is costing you between 3 and 5%, depending on the situation. Certainly 3% at the moment, maybe even less, and 5% in a normal circumstance. There is a gain of potentially 7 to 9%, depending on the return you're getting on an annual basis, and it pays for the monthly installment of the mortgage and gives you a return. And you've got a nest egg. So you can take 100 grand, put 50 in, pay the mortgage and get a return, and you're sitting on 50 grand to survive in circumstances in rainy days or in retirement. Why do people not grasp that simple strategy?
Do you know what? It's not just them being able to grasp it. I mean, we can fall down the rabbit warren a little bit further regarding the mindset of the people that actually do it, because it goes from they rent, they buy, they say they're in that one property, or they may move once more because of that very linear mindset of moving maybe once to a forever home. Then that's the goal achieved very quickly. So I think you find is and we can probably maybe try and backtrack to why people are still maybe quite stupidly just following that goal or that structure, is that they feel that they've achieved their goal very quickly because they've got the house. So then it's just a matter of happily waiting 25 years to pay that off. That's right. So, but what you're talking about, so maybe some simple, it might obviously seem quite complex, and that maybe people would be bowled over by that and would just go, no, I want that over that, and then I'll give that to my daughter. Yeah. So I think the combative way is really, if you push mortgage to one side, which I think is what's probably going to happen, is that more people are going to acknowledge the fact that, so you're talking about a return, which is you can creatively, if you listen to people who maybe, again, I'm identifying another complication is people actually being prepared to listen to somebody else about their finances and about their options. Because I think most people of the certain affluence which we're referring to is probably a bit guarded about what they earn, because maybe they don't earn a great deal. What they do, they shield from their family, and they just get that house, and then it's that very simplified goal of own, pass on, which is, as we're pointing out, not necessarily the most creative or the cleverest way of clearing funds.
But a strategy that works for them.
I remember speaking to somebody quite recently, and they would say, well, what a terrible investment buying a house is anyway, because you don't get a return until 25 years time. And again, that's a very poor decision, because like you've pointed out, there's plenty of ways of utilizing what you have and what finances you're then capable to borrow, lend, and buy from in relation to the gap between what you've already paid back, owned, and what you're, you know, what you're prepared to switch, pay more, reduce more. I mean, arguably, you could ask how many people understand how much they can overpay their mortgage if they've got a flat fee, or if they've got, I doubt many people really delve that far into it. They figure out their monthly return, by whatever, 800, say £800 a month, and that's it. They'll pay that for 25 years without any question. So really what we should be talking about is more is why isn't that ever questioned? Why are so many people still prepared to just follow that?
Education.
And sadly, I think it just is. I mean, no, people don't walk into an 18-year-old's class, or certainly not when we were 18, and would say, you're getting to that stage now where you're gonna, they don't assume you're gonna buy one of the first.
It should be one of the first lessons, regular lessons. And again, I'm going to be flippant when I say this, because again, we've both been in British education. Would you like to learn how to manage money, make money, utilize money, leverage money, and compound money, or do you want to learn French?
I'll go for the middle, because No, you're right. I mean,
you understand.
Yeah, I completely understand.
And no offense to the French that are watching.
That's right.
We're looking at a language being learned or life being learned. Learn life first.
Exactly. I remember I used to when I'm still working in logistics now, but I'm trying to in this P word, but I remember sitting in a meeting. We had to do that horrible annual one where they still use that term of taking you out your comfort zone. I'm not a fan of it. I don't like the term, but it's used quite regularly. Basically, your comfort zone is what you're good at, and you're asked to do something you're not good at. And usually public speaking falls into that. Yeah, I actually don't particularly mind. I've picked up a few, tricks of the trade along the way, to get myself through, but I understand that it's not somebody's chosen field. And also a lot of it is, you can get through a proportion of it by, what was the thing I tend to say is something like, there's going to be a PowerPoint behind me, but I've made it very difficult for you to read, so you've got to look and listen to me. So you've got your own little ways of maybe breaking the stiffness of the room. But we used to get asked on the spot to think of something that as a shipping company we could do that would work around the world, and we could begin to do immediately that everyone else isn't doing. Go, you've got 5 minutes. And I remember going, whoa, that's impossible. But I remember one day I came up with one which I'm quite happy to spit out there for everybody, but in logistics, and this goes back to the property, is that where they parallel is that there's no reason why we identify, I'll put it to more logistics, if we identify a particular age group, university level, where you could potentially start to run your own business. So either the business people studying business at university, or people who are planning on being entrepreneurs. So that could, again, covers more subjects. Establishing when it's best to get in front of them and explain to them the power of you being in control of your shipment, and you understanding that you can influence ethically how you present your product. Because we find, and my biggest critique of most, this is me damning a different industry now, but is that people work really, really hard on a product, really, really hard on it. They maybe even studied at school considering what it was going to be and how they're going to present it to the world. But then when it gets to moving it, they do it the cheapest way they possibly can. Yeah. And I've always found that challenging to say, well, we got to get in earlier, so they understand that there's a control of that movement, and there's also, of course, there's a cost element relevant to the world of your potential impact within it. But if you can get to them early enough, maybe at school, and maybe I'd say pre-university personally, because I think when you grab that guy who's maybe year one of university, though I think his listening skills would be improved, I remember
you've still been influenced by others, by elders as well.
Yeah, and I also think that but aren't you? There's a certain age when you're so trying to find yourself, you're probably also going to counter any intellectual argument coming your way for just a smidgen. And again, if you're trying to do it by a whole year bracket, I just think that if you grab somebody around sixth form or college, and like you said, discuss their finances, how they can structure their finances, and how they can actually, and maybe you have to put it in this modern day about how they make money from something they already have. Yeah. Again, like the property. And I guess until the education seeps back in, you're going to get pockets of people who are going to be able to identify how they can utilize that gap of money.
Which is people that do understand it are going to take advantage of it. And I don't mean advantage in a negative way. I mean advantage they're going to use their skill set. You don't know what you don't know. So the people that do know are going to say, right, I've got 250,000 of equity. My company needs a cash injection, or I'm going to diversify my business and I'm going to remortgage my home or houses or investments, or I'm going to pull the investment and I'm going to have that pot of cash to protect me and my family. They're going to go into lockdown. They're going to go into e-commerce. They're going to go into online training. They're going to go into online collaboration, Zoom rooms and Zoom networking. And they're going to be fine for 6 months. It's those that haven't. And I think this is the problem, a large problem with society in general, not necessarily generations. I think society is that we as a society have become, because of technology, and it's a catch-22 because we're being pushed into a lazy society because of lockdown, so that we're now sitting on our backsides on Zoom all the time. There's a contradiction in terms when we're sitting on Zoom. We're becoming a lazy society because of technology. But we're being pushed into more of a lazy society because of the P word, because of the situation. However, people are suffering because of that laziness, and the laziness in finance. Laziness such as not educating themselves on finance. How many times do you get a transaction? In Qatar, we get text messages every time there's a transaction. I have monthly transactions for $2, $4 that come off my account, and I have no idea what they are, but do you do anything about it? No, because $6 or $8 or $10 is not worth your time, and sounds really, really bad. It's not worth your time chasing around making phone calls that might cost you another $10 to cancel it. You don't know what it is. The easiest scenario is to cancel the card and get a new card, because it's lazy and easier to do it.
I say to my wife, there's
society.
There's an hourly rate debate which I use regularly with staff and with my wife, which is, it's all well and good when somebody says to me, yeah, I worked through that myself. Nobody else had to do it. I got a really good deal, or okay, I managed to pick up that item for free, and it's not as good quality, but we've picked it up for free, and it takes you XYZ period of time to, a 40-minute drive and then 3 hours of build. And I say, well, apply your hourly rate next to it, and the fuel, it wasn't free. So, no, there's an effort level which people need to always apply, and there's a cost to most of these things. You're absolutely right. Okay, beans in a TV. If I use shipping analogies, as you know, I'm always going to. But if you drop a tin of beans in, let's say Asda, because we're English, British. Drop a tin of beans. Sorry.
Easy now.
Oh, sorry. It was swiping.
Honestly, see you Australians, man.
I'm in sunnier climates these days. As are you.
Likewise.
Yeah, as are you. No, it's winter here, so it's only 32 today.
Oh, nightmare. Yeah, I think we're about 28.
Yeah, I know. It's sunburned by the back of my neck.
How to get British people on side for the podcast, yeah.
Apologies, yeah. Well, no, it's sunny over there. I'm getting told, as you can imagine, and as I'm sure you get, whenever any of our friends from back home get a sunny day, they feel that wonderful urge to rub it in my face, but I can't do it in return, which is obviously, I was using a tin of beans analogy, is where I always say to some of the customers who are moving shipping is, imagine you drop a tin of beans in an Asda aisle, they'll go, oh, don't worry about that, love, and shoo you away and pick it up and whatever, it's all fine. Now you drop a TV in Asda, they'll take you to the other room and they'll sit you down and they'll probably discuss a structure of how you pay that back. or there'll be some engagement about what happens there. I'm not saying this is just, you know, I'm not throwing Asda under the bus, but I just mean that there is always a difference between the cost of what you're doing something to and the impact it will have on you, you know? So, you know, I tend to use that if somebody in my line of work, a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to insure my freight. Nothing's ever happened to my container in the 20 years I've been shipping. You know,
and then the P word comes along and it's stuck.
Exactly, and they're ringing me up.
Blockade for Qatar comes along and it's in Jebel Ali for a year.
There you go. That's right.
Absolutely.
So, as I said, there's always an unexpected. I almost used the P word then. There's always an unexpected problem around the corner. Right, and again, we can bring that back to what you're saying about people identifying the equity in their property, people spending more time to realize how they probably should be, in my line of work, say shipping ethically, or more effectively by utilizing marine cover for insurance, checking to see if that's actually effective, if a case-by-case basis would be more effective, but to make sure that you're basically in a better position when things go wrong. And I think what we've talked about a lot is that people aren't in a better position when things go wrong. Again, arguably because of education. I think I got to be careful saying that too much, because you could argue say everything's about a weaker education, even to an intellectual. There's always something else you could learn. There's always something else you could understand. But
yeah, sure.
In the general terms, if we ring fence what the people we're referring to about, let's say, the utilization of equity in their property to capitalize on the situation, the reality is, in this scenario right now, I would be surprised. I mean, I know I do it, but I'm maybe a little bit more driven than the average, and I've also always been passionate about personal growth, application of what I'm writing down in terms of goals and things changing to me.
Objectives.
Yeah, that's all. I mean, I will class that as not really as important as me still endeavoring to proceed forward. So I do know how much equity I have in my property. I've got a pretty good idea of how I'm going to utilize it, though I keep changing that depending on how this landscape is currently unfolding in front of me now.
Yeah. So I mean, the people that were going to go into property investment that are training, or they're learning, and they're educating, this will put a lot of people off from doing that. The people that were on the fence, the people that were trying to learn and maybe are not as what's the word I'm looking for? You know, you've got people that can take to property very easily. You've got people that can take to maths, you know, quite easily, and they just get it. They understand it. You've got those that say, well, I don't really want to be going into London. You know, if I move back to the UK and we live in the southeast, which is most likely in Kent, I'm not going to be going in and out of London for 3 hours a day. I'm probably going to work for myself. I'm going to work from home, or I'm going to work from a small office, and I'm going to probably work in property management, facilities, and fit out. Now, I can take to that fairly easily because it's my background, but people that either move back as expats, that move back to the UK, that go into property, and then this situation hits, they may have moved their life back. And to an extent, this is a scenario for you. This is a scenario that covers your situation. You are looking, you're kind of caught in the middle of which, do you stay down under or do you return home? And you're in a no-win situation, and then there's this big gap in the middle, and the gap's potentially only going to get bigger and bigger. So it's not necessarily a question, it's just a statement that a lot of people that were going to go into property, that were going to go into setting up their own business, whether it's property or something else as an SME, will be completely put off by this.
Agreed. Yeah, as we know, I think you're either going to get people who are going to be completely put off by this, because you're right. I mean, the scenario that could absolutely quash, you know, it's easier if you simplify the math. But for my situation, I would look at my equity, and I would look at the fact that, you know, exactly like you're talking about, I was always going to buy property number 2, which was always going to lead me to property number 3. And what happens is, instead of having the simplified approach of that one singular property being your nest egg, actually you'll have the opportunity to diversify on which one becomes that, and which one, you know, you can go family home, holiday home, rental, however you do it, you can progressively do that, you know, like you're, you know, playing a very simple game of Monopoly, but it just depends if you're on, you know, what's the cheap one? Old Kent Road or Pall Mall. I mean, the differentials are, you know, worldwide. So, you know, if we stay here, we could and we would utilize the equity in the property to buy a property here. So then I have two properties. It wouldn't be a sell or not sell situation. I think just to go back to people getting into property management, I mean, I'm using one live situation at the moment where somebody spent the last 10 months happily nurturing the development of their first ever property, which they're going to property manage, potentially move on to their next, and begin the, you know, begin their own book of business from it, you know, to build a business from it. And well, obviously they're not going to be able to sell the first property. So, you know, I mean, immediately, yeah, exactly. Immediately they're in a hole. As I said, certainly this example I'm giving is somebody who probably would be, you know, the hole is not as deep, but the off-put to people who would immediately be in a hole would be enormous. And I really hope, I was talking to my wife about this actually, I just really hope, you know, if you look at a comedian in this situation, you'd like to think he's writing loads of jokes at the moment. Or you'd like to think that if you were a movie producer, you'd be writing all sorts of elaborate
scripts,
things for you to discuss. Exactly. And for us, we've got time to talk about, I've got time to think about how we effectively worldwide logistically control supply chains and move shipping. You have time to think about, and in fact,
time to get stuff done now.
Yeah,
there's no one asking me questions every 2 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But again, I think the landscape change in property is going to be the fact that people will very quickly identify that warehouse offices and the dynamic of an office will change.
Has changed, yes. More and more people after this passes. How many people do you think are going to turn around and go, can I carry on working from home?
Exactly. But again, it's a discipline as well, because I'm smart enough to know that the individual who says that they can work at home versus the individual who says that I can work remotely. Now, if somebody says to me they can work remotely, I'm immediately a little bit more engaged with that. If somebody says I can work from home, I feel they're sat in their pajamas. And I know full well from somebody, I mean, in all fairness, the reason why I'm wearing a t-shirt is because we've got push-up goals at the moment where I'm making sure I do, you know, exercise whilst we're working because of the situation that the world is in. Stay healthy, everybody. But again, how people are monitored and KPI'd versus paying for an office. So the dynamic of a meeting between, say, myself and yourself about, say, Z team, and then we've decided that we don't need the scale of rent or facility because it was proven in XYZ during XYZ scenario where people work from home. Yeah, I think you're going to find a lot of people who are going to start out businesses, or people who are going to certainly not even consider going to an office. So the landscape will change and the dynamic of a worker will change, but for the good or for the detriment is going to be difficult to say, because we all don't have a ability or a sheet or a simplified way of going, yeah, it's working. You know, this situation is working. Because I mean, I work predominantly in worldwide shipping, and you have to have an element of trust certainly in your commercial team, because realistically, you need them to have the freedom to be out in the field or working remotely. I am interested to see, as I've just mentioned, how we firefight the people who are abusing the change in landscape, to the people who are conscientiously aware of the benefit of it and the improvement they can make to their work. Like I have a benefit to work. Yeah, I mean, I have an ability to work remotely. I've been doing it for over 15 years, so my discipline is good.
So just conscious of time, and we can go offline and carry on the conversation. But just one final point is that there are so many, I would say, global positives that could be taken from the most disastrous event to occur in certainly our lives and billions of people's lives. And what I mean by that is you carry on from the fact that you don't require as large an office or even an office at all, because everyone's working from home and the continuation of that occurs. Yes, you have to combat issues such as human resources, productivity, KPIs, roles and responsibilities that could end up increasing an HR's department size and role. And certainly the handbooks, the employee handbooks would obviously start to grow and evolve even more so when it comes to remote working. But then you look at the other aspect of the overhead is reduced. You look at travel time for individuals, therefore productivity increases. And something that there's no way I'm trying to quantify this, but the environmental impact for the positive of having less people on the roads. Now, the environmentalists are going to be all over that. Right? Yeah. The productivity, everyone's going to be all over that. People that are running events, maybe not, but they're then going to start to do as they're doing now, running remote events or running Zoom conferences, which means they can charge less because their overhead is not a hotel, not the food, and not the transportation, not the flights, not as much of a team in which they can do the same content because we're in a digital age. And it pulls the entire world, which is what this scenario is doing. It pulls the entire world together like that.
Yeah.
Geographically, it takes me from the UK or from here, it takes me about 20 hours door to door to come and see you, or you do this within 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
And business can evolve because of that.
The positives, if you approach it correctly, are absolutely incredible. And, yes, you'll blur the lines between some job spec, because there will have to be some variable. You're right. You can't just say HR goes up through the roof. There'll be some blurring, there'll be some blend, because basically the dynamic of how things are done will be reduced or changed or flipped on its head. I personally completely agree. I mean, look, I've had to experience the Carniche Road in Qatar. I would arguably say it's improved currently. But then again, you're right. The people who
it has now. It's closed.
Exactly. So you're not even allowed on it. Oh, right. So I mean, we're still allowed on the freeways, but I mean, you'll get quizzed.
Likewise.
Yeah. But I think you're absolutely hitting the nail on the head when this is the way really we should be considering to grow. If you're not growing, you're going. And I presented it before offline, but there's got to be less me, much more we. I think when we look at the fact that how many times I saw you a year was based on how much we could justify or effectively fly out to Qatar. So I would be going to Qatar, Dubai, Oman. Back when I was working in the UK, I'd come out to see you maybe 6 times a year.
Yeah.
Realistically, as the landscape changes, we can do this within time zones as effectively, because the tangible items and I tend to function commercially around the personability of an engagement. I do like an element of the psychology of the engagement. I do tend to mirror people, which is still quite an old habit, but you know, in a meeting environment. I still think that you can have those influences over a Zoom meeting, or the likes of, and you can still have a live. You're actually my example of this is that your next network is in front of people, if they're allowed, maybe 1.5 meters next to each other, and the camera's going to be on, so I can still be involved as well. So how we maneuver through this kind of landscape is nothing but incredible, because you're right, you can reduce overheads, you can reduce international travel. Really, international travel could have been reduced a few years previously.
Could have been reduced a long time. And again, I know that sounds stupid, but it's laziness, and it sounds contradiction, but it's laziness that, oh, it's okay, I'll just jump on a flight and go and do it, rather than actually doing it on a Zoom call because they wanted to go and travel. People are looking for excuses to actually get on a plane and spend time away from loved ones, and then something like this hits and they go, hang on a second, that trip that I said from Washington to Denver, or from Doha to Dubai, for example, the amount of times I went to Dubai on the red eye and came back at 10 o'clock in the evening, I spent 20 hours literally door to door, travel to travel, put in 6 meetings, and I could have had 6 meetings in literally an hour.
6 hours.
Sorry, 6 meetings, an hour, 6 hours, done, no travel, no cost of a flight, no cost of a hotel if I stayed overnight, no cost of any food, no having to entertain people. And that's had to happen. We've got a project right now that's being run from Dubai and run from the Netherlands. Not one person from the client, apart from the office manager here, who isn't, with the greatest of respect, actually going to be the one signing off the construction. They're not in Doha. They're managing the project from Europe and from Dubai. They can't get here because of what's going on, but they probably wouldn't have come here as regularly because of the blockade anyway. 6 to 8 hours door to door for something that used to take 40-minute flight, therefore say 2 hours door to door, 3 hours door to door, including check-in time. So it's just doubled the time scale. Now, if anything, it's reduced it by 80%, the time that it takes to get things done. If I look back at my older, when I began in logistics, and if I look at the way that I was desperate to work overseas, because that was how I developed and sharpened my teeth and understood and grew and sat next to people. And I think realistically, and I mean, they do say it commercially, that you should, if you're effective, you have an ability to be a chameleon. Now, I think that ability to become a chameleon now is going to stretch in terms of business, to be able to be ever changing and flexible to the people opposite, and implementing this simple engagement is exceptional. But as I said, I was going to Tel Aviv so frequently, then to Canada, then it became China, and again, I'm move it forward now. I know that there's a strong differential between a business trip and a break. Now, I've never had a break on a business trip. You've been part of my business trips for probably 7 years now. And we've moved now into this era where we're capable. Again, we're competent anyway to have always done this. It's just that it's now forced upon us. So I think that's the differential, is that a lot of people with some savvy, simplified tech understanding and a commercial knowledge will roll with this. They'll roll with this. Let me just use another example. I was listening to a podcast yesterday from one of my coaches, JT Fox. Give him a bit of a plug, and millionaireflix.com. So millionaireflix.com has basically got thousands and thousands of hours of coaching content that he has done, that his coaches have done. Mega Success in November was in LA. You've got various conferences over the years in which you've got key influencers, Mel Gibson, Mark Wahlberg, Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple, all putting their opinions and advice onto pretty much a cloud-based network of content. Now, he's not making money on this. He's charging like $20 a month, right? And I paid it $20 a month. It's a bit like that thing that comes out your bank account, 1997. You don't even notice it. It comes out. And yesterday, and for the rest of this week at, I think it's 10 o'clock Eastern time, he's doing free webinars on content on about 6 different topics: business, property, speaking, coaching, various things, because of the scenario. So, and all of his events have been shut down. He's now having to do it Zoom, webinars, lives. He didn't used to do lives, he's doing lives now. And someone on the comments on this free webinar that he's doing commented that he was pitching Millionaire Flicks at $20 a month. And he just lost it. Not lost it, he didn't lose it. He was just frustrated. If anything, he was probably laughing about it. And he was like, are you insane? Are you telling me that you think I'm pitching you $20 a month, which doesn't make me any money when we put everything in the cloud, etc. And I'm giving you this content for $20 a month, which is 2 to 3 cups of coffee. By the time you put in your caramel and your added shot and this, it's, you know, it's 2 or 3 cups of coffee. And you're complaining that you think I'm pitching you. Pitching is a $2,000 or a $25,000, you know, scenario. People were complaining. Spin that into modern day society of what we've just spoken about. We're on Zoom. Zoom sends you emails saying you can do this, this, and this for 45 minutes, and you can only have 2 people on the call. To upgrade, it's $14 a month or whatever it is, $14.95. So you pay the $14.95 a month. Again, you don't even notice it, but you can have as long you want on a phone call with up to 100 people, but you've got limited bandwidth. Now what's happened is Zoom's stocks have gone through the roof. I think they've virtually gone up by 50% since it all happened. More and more people are using the bandwidth, so they've had to pull back on the bandwidth, and now people are complaining that their meetings are not as effective and they're having to pay $14.95, or they're having to upgrade to conference rooms, or they're having to, and you think about the logic of that, of the complaints of the $20 a month for all the free content, or all the content that is there to help you in business, property, coaching, speaking, etc. You get the same mindset of people complaining about $14.95, which allows them to have up to 100 people. So a company can use it for intercompany meetings, as I have been doing. Then you spin it into, let's say it was $100 a month. Right? Let's say it was 100 US dollars, right? Call it 150 pounds, which it's not now, obviously. 150 pounds a month to not get in your car, to not have an office, to not have other people in their car, to give them the same content in the same way as we're doing this, and people will find a reason to not pay it because they think it's too much money. And it all goes back to this mindset of, I think, modern day society, where we become lazy in certain things. So we're willing to waste money on Netflix, or something's coming out from Kay's catalog or Little Woods, or we'll buy it this and it's $7.99 a month, or whatever the case may be. But when it comes to business, or when it comes to us as individuals to improve ourselves or better ourselves or educate ourselves, $20 a month is too much.
Yeah.
I just cannot understand the logic.
It's actually, I mean, obviously that subject is very close to my heart as well, very frustrating. But yeah, but I mean, of course, it's relevant to your financial situation. I mean, LeBron James, what does he spend £1 million on himself, $1 million on himself, or $10 million on himself every year? So there's an economy of scale to what you're capable of doing. But you're absolutely right. If people think that you're selling to them, they don't want to pay it. And that is irrelevant of the amount of personal growth and access to information that they may have. So that's the part that we need, or somehow.
I think it's a minority. I think there's a minority of people that influence, and again, I'm apologies, I'm going off at a tangent a little bit, but it's relevant. There's a minority of people that influence the world, right? So this particular scenario is infecting the minority of the global population, but is affecting 99.5. I'm being conservative when I say 0.5 is being infected and 99.5 is being affected because of what's happening. Now, I'm not going to go into detail because I don't want to offend anyone. I have certain thoughts and beliefs on society, but in general, I'll give you one simple example, right? It's a very simple example. Lewis Hamilton, okay, had posted a video on Twitter, I think it was Twitter, and his nephew came through wearing a dress, right? Now, My son's been walking around in my wife's shoes since he was like 2. He's a kid, right? That's what they do. But he jokingly said, "Oh, you can't wear that, you're a boy." And because he's got thousands and thousands of followers,
millions of followers,
a minority, but a lot of comments from a minority of people jumped all over him, and he had to apologize in public for his comments. Now, I don't agree with that. That affects everyone else. It affects everyone else. So you look at, and we take it back to business. You look at people that are, let's say you've got Grant Cardone, JT Fox, Tony Collins, Rob Moore, Mark Homer, various business people that I listen to, right? And some people will agree with it. Some people won't really give a monkeys about it. And other people will think it's a con. And they'll do it because they've read something in a newspaper or they've read a comment online. And we're such a negative society of keyboard warriors that everyone is being influenced by negativity. Everyone's watching the news at the moment. Everyone thinks it's a game about the number of deaths that's going on. Oh, Spain's higher than Italy now. It's not a jockeying position in a horse race. People die. Yeah, but we're so interested in looking at news and potential facts and what's happening. I saw the other day that the UK went down in numbers for 2 days in a row, and everyone thought that we were at the apex. Bang! Next day it was nearly 400 deaths. I mean, the amount of things that just go round and round based on negative comments for any society from the minority of people affects the majority of people. Why are the majority of the global population succumbing to a minority opinion in any subject matter?
I would be interested to suggest, or I would be interested to present my thoughts on how many reduced negative comments there would be if they had to state their real name next to it. So
if they were face to face.
Well, of course, I mean, there has to be an intellectual would probably say, or not even intellectual, somebody would just maybe, let's say a relatively normal person would probably say, that might offend me, but it's your right to offend me as it is my right to say that offends me. So rather than going around that rabbit hole of saying that, if you're prepared to call somebody out that it offends you, you have to accept the fact that other person could call them back out and say, well, you've offended me by calling me out. Because ultimately everyone should have the exact same right. And the right to everyone else. I was just going to say, so the Lewis Hamilton thing, great example.
Not if it's going to lambast someone for having their opinion.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So I think I arguably suggest that people of certain influence, for example, as soon as you're over a certain million followers, it is, I would probably suggest that you don't ever reply to any comments, and then very soon enough they realize that the actual superstar doesn't man that account and they stop. I'm pretty confident that there's a number of influencers. Or they don't
give a monkeys what you're saying about them anyway.
That's right.
If anything, they thrive on the comments because there's no such thing as negative PR.
Exactly. So there's a discipline to that, and the problem is, you're right. The person making that the most severe comment they can is because they know the quickest and easiest way to get a reaction from somebody is to make them angry. So it takes an enormity of self-discipline to not react to that, or to not even respond to anybody, even if it's good. Again, that's the spin from that is, does somebody who feels that what they're saying is warranted in this current climate then open themselves up to continue that conversation to somebody who doesn't feel that what they're saying is warranted in the current climate? So you have to either rise above or drop into the precipice and have that debate. Personally, I am quite happy to have an argument with somebody who's got something, but that's my own, I don't have enough followers for me to be thinking about the adverse effects about then dropping in and engaging. But I would say, I would leave my 2 cents down to this, and that is, firstly, I would be I would love it if people who were in any capability of leaving any remarks had to have signed in, you know, had shown some ID, and then that's stored safely on a cloud somewhere, so that there is some direct responsibility for your actions. Yeah, and then obviously, as I said, if somebody goes, you know, everyone's going to go top heavy, you know, with their to rile you. Excuse me. There's that, but I would like to see, especially in this situation right now, is where we've got this 24-hour media coverage of a situation that is has not been experienced. I'm doing really well of not using the P word. Have not been experienced by people before.
You haven't used your other word as well.
No, I haven't used both P words.
UN. Yeah.
No, I haven't used either UN or P. So these particular scenarios haven't been experienced by anybody before. There you go. It's a good way of talking about it. And in this media coverage of 24-hour media, they should have a moral obligation to, with every 30 minutes of a news feed, 10 minutes of it must be good news.
Positive.
Because I am, even though I stay pretty positive and I'm pretty enthusiastic, because I'm infused by this, because you're right, I see the landscape change and people react. You know, you've got to maneuver. You know, listen, so I listened to a podcast the other day, and it was from somebody who was much more athletic than I am, much more intellectual than I am. I think it was actually Andy Stumpf, the Clear It Hot podcast. But he made a very simplified, and I've associated him to any line of work. Don't worry about being shot at. The analogy is being shot at. But if you freeze with fear whilst you're being shot at, and you create the people who have to maneuver around you to be put in harm's way, then you need to rethink your own approach to maneuvering. And as I said, I pull that back into this situation. We've all had to reconsider how we maneuver through international trade, property, influence, money, everything, relationships, engagement. Every single thing has had a little bit of a shake-up, like a little snow globe. We've shaken the bottom of it, turned it upside down, and we're going to, you know, see how it settles.
I've got a major problem, and we're going to end it there, Stuart. And I must thank you for your engagement and having a really good not a debate, but just a thought process. But I'm going to end the show with one thing. I've got a real problem on my hands, and if anyone, when I post this, can give me advice on how I resolve this. Qatar is in lockdown. The only thing that is open is chemists, pharmacies, and supermarkets. And it has been for the last 10 days. Now, if you haven't already noticed, I am a bloke and I behave like a bloke when it comes to anniversaries.
Gotcha.
Tomorrow is my anniversary. What do I buy my wife from a pharmacy or a supermarket that's not going to get me a slap in the face? There is
nothing
a dilemma.
Is the answer. Nothing. If I will give you my answer, obviously the listeners can give you their answers. I would suggest, probably the only thing you can buy from a pharmacy is maybe one of those skeletal models of a body, and then you can say, and here's the heart. Here's the heart. You can be. It's about thinking creatively in this situation. But no, the answer is nothing from a pharmacy. That, I mean, again, maybe something that, you know, maybe lightens the mood in terms of here's a little bit of something
positive to make her laugh.
Exactly, but I think you're probably going to have to go man-made. So I want to see this creativity from you. I think you need to go man-made.
Oh no.
And
okay,
from what I would suggest is probably look to utilize what we've been talking about and your creativity. So it's an engagement. So what is it? Is it wedding, or is it wedding engagement?
Wedding anniversary, yes.
How many years? Hundreds. So, jeez, that was like a punch in the face. It's pretty much the same as mine, so I don't know why I said. But
I'm going to show her you. I'm going to show her this. Show her you.
What I would suggest is think back to your wedding Yeah, who was critically in that room, best man, or even all of the core members of that you're able to get on, and then maybe
do a Zoom chat.
And do a quiz over Zoom about how much they like her, not you. That's
Fair
it.
point. Fair point.
Bring in everyone from 7 years ago, get them online, and then point out how hot it is where you are and how cold it is where they are.
Yeah, exactly. And then say bye.
That's all I have for them. Yeah. No, I think use the tools that you have at your disposal, which we've been talking about, and that is a bit of creativity. And I think most gifts, you know, if you just frivolously put it to money, they aren't ever as effective. My first anniversary gift to my wife, the current Mrs. Mounter, as I like to refer to her. The first, she is a very hands-on individual, and I basically had a loving inscription gracefully scraped into a hammer, which is also her weapon of choice, and it hangs nicely in the kitchen. Right. Yeah, so I think.
Did it have to have a wooden handle? No, it's paper, isn't it? Paper.
Yeah, it was, you're right. Yeah, wooden handle. But again, you will be judged by everyone who listens to this now, and I would like to see what you do.
Put a noose around my neck.
Yeah, I think so. And personally, my recommendation is to think of those people who made those funny speeches back in the day and pull them back in and get them working for you again. Fair?
Done. Good idea. Fair idea.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll get you to participate in that as well. Stuart, we're going to wrap it up there.
Happy to say some positive words, more about her understanding than your ability to be whatever it is she sees in you.
You met the woman once and you understood her immediately.
Exactly.
The only thing you couldn't understand is why she was with me. Yes, we understand that. And on that note,
everyone waited for her to finish speaking and just went, "Why are you with Simon?"
Yes, exactly. And on that note, we're going to call it quits.
No, best of luck with it.
The podcast. Thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks for watching. First one. Stuart and I are going to do this again because we like to have a good debate, not against each other, but just about things. So, Stuart, we'll look forward to having you on a podcast in the very near future. Take care.
Thank you, sir.
Hang on.